time to paint perfectly referenced landscapes is over. We already have pictures of them, so how do we make your painting count in this age of internet flooding with slop? We simplify, light, and sharpen. This simple formula will make sure you have design intent in every single step of the process. When beginners start making art, they are obsessed with unbroken lines and shading. In all my years as an art teacher, the most common questions have always been, how do I do precise lines? Or how do I do smooth blending? My answer is always, and still is, don't. The most transformative aspect about learning art is that you literally start seeing things in a new way. And I don't mean just the small nuances of color. And that's what I want to do for you in this video. A beginner often sees elements as individual objects. Here's a flower pot and here's a bottle. Everything is carved out in their own individual symbols. For an experienced painter, they can see the exact same things and have a whole selection of options to choose from for how to look at things. One of my art teachers completely opened up my mind to a new way of seeing things when she explained to me that when you walk in a forest and you're surrounded by this avalanche of detail from every single direction, you don't look or even think about the edges of every single blade of grass. You experience them as a mass that your brain quickly gives up on trying to process because it's simply too much information. When you're painting a painting like this, you're not painting what you see, even if you have reference. You're painting the experience of seeing, and that's a completely different thing. You get where this is going. When we are painting a landscape, at this point, there's no need to replicate how it looks. All of us have cameras in our pockets now. We're adding no value to this planet by just having one more picture on the internet. What you, yes, you specifically, can create is that you can make us feel how you experience that place. So how do we actually get there in practice? In this painting, I'm using one of my favorite processes that I've ever made, block roll on varnish. It leaves big open gaps wherever the brush pressure is light, and it also mixes with the existing color on the same layer. Trying to do small details with this would be an absolute nightmare, but here's the trick. And by the way, you can use these techniques with any brush that has similar characteristics, so please don't think this applies specifically to this one tool. Did you notice in the beginning of this process how I laid down those warm tones before I started sculpting in these green and blue hues? You can still see that color through these gaps, and therefore the entire chronological order of brushstrokes becomes a part of the look of this painting. When you work in layers like these, it's possible to give even the saturated blue color a slightly warm look to it without going into muddy colors or blending them together. This is optical mixing, and it's pretty much magic. And it doesn't really matter what style you use, you can still use this technique in your own paintings. You can simplify your entire painting into zones like this, and still have each zone be interesting on their own. Furthermore, you can elevate this technique by combining wildly different colors, but by getting the value, the lightness or darkness of those colors as close as possible. When we see a surface like this from a distance, it doesn't look like a plasticky smooth surface anymore, but there's this interesting dance and tension between the hues that is too much information for your eyes to process, but we still experience it as one area of color. So just like when we are surrounded by nature, we're not trying to see absolutely everything, but we are trying to understand what we are seeing. Now let's connect the dots from the beginning into lines. With trees, most people find the branches pretty easy to draw. That is, until they vanish into foliage and we see only bits and pieces of them. A mindset that's still obsessing over objects and symbols will try to justify every single branch by tracing them back through the layers of foliage. But that's not how we look at trees. We might pay attention to the trunk and few of the biggest branches, but beyond that, it's just visual noise to us. The real magic trick of Impressionism that you can implement into your own painting is by having these broken lines in your piece. The real moment you actually level up is when you actively start noticing which part of the reference you actively pay attention to without even trying. When you look at your subject, pay attention to the way you look. What stands out to you? Not after a prolonged observation, but in a split second. When you notice the act of looking you do, take that as your guiding principle in the way that you depict the subject on your canvas. You can master this style of Impressionism not by just painting loosely and making a mess, but by focusing your painting attention on how you want your viewers to experience the space that you are creating. And all of us are different. We all look at things in different ways. Some of us pay attention to the saturated color or texture or shape language. That is the individual angle that you want to be paying attention to, what you see. Here in this painting, I'm letting the visual noise created by the texture of my brushstrokes and layers of colors carry all areas that I don't think are important for this scene. The only areas where I go into smaller brushstrokes and tighter lines are the edges that are supposed to read. I follows the light. Even though the painting might look chaotic, there's always more definition around light. When those same lines leave light areas and enter shadows, I break them apart, as this type of jumping motion eventually leads the eye back to defined edges. You're almost like guiding the eye into a maze and trying to make the maze so difficult that they give up and return to the start point. Light gives volume and shape to your painting, and defining this part isn't harder without smooth blends. It's actually easier, as you can use the direction of your brushstrokes as one more way to describe your shapes. So the next time you are trying to get precious with your lines and blends, just don't. The final phase is sharpening. And you might think this is simple, but there are actually two sides to this coin. Sharpening only works if you're brave enough to hide the rest. I completely obscured this mountain peak because it wasn't the story I wanted to tell. That might work for this painting, but this is a completely different landscape. Hiding is just as an important tool as defining those sharp edges. You can tell so much more through your art by not showing us every single thing, but focus your and our attention to the things that matter. In this scene, I really wanted to capture that feeling of light and shadows passing through a landscape. Whenever I see something like this, it feels like I can never quite take a photo that has the same type of movement and feeling of a disappearing moment. Currently, the world is being filled with perfectly curated pictures. Everything looks so perfect that there's absolutely zero personality in it. I hope that you have the courage to be messy in your own unique, beautiful way, because those are the paintings that we really need right now. I'm Mikko, and for more art tips and tutorials, hit those like and subscribe buttons so we can go into new places and level up our art skills in the next video.